Hello, friends, and welcome to the first coding video for building and live coding the Pareto training web application with React, Amazon Web Services, and node.js. So my name is Michael Lichev, but you can call me Misha, and I'm going to be walking you through the process of building a functional, decently good looking and scalable web application. The key is to be able to see something being done so that you can understand how you might implement it yourself. So right now, on the right, we're looking at the web application as it currently is running on a local server. And on the left here, we have our index.js. And so this is the foundation of the entire React application, where we are mounting our root component based off of an element we're including in our index.html. What we're doing here, we're doing a couple things. We're importing some dependencies from npm modules or through files that currently exist in our application. So npm module stands for Node Package Manager. Essentially what they are is they're open source libraries that we can use and we can import just by spelling them out right here. So we want to import Amplify from AWS Amplify, and we actually store the information about our package.json, about our npm modules right here in the package.json. So here what's going on, we're using AWS Amplify, and this is going to be a theme that comes up throughout the entire video series, is we're going to be using a service that Amazon Web Services has created to demo its capabilities and show how Amplify makes the developer workflow more intuitive, scalable, and just how plain easy and fun it makes the entire process. So we're going to come back to this later, but here what Amplify is doing is it's configuring an authentication system, meaning a login and registration system, as well as configuring an API that we have deployed, or that we will deploy, to essentially have a way of handling business logic based off of the interactions the user makes on the web app. So the purpose of the web application itself is to serve as a companion for the Pareto physical products that train full stack developers. And so right here, it's a very, very simple application right now. We took a boilerplate that Anomaly Innovations created for their serverless stack tutorial, as well as a couple of APIs that we built out that we're going to be integrating with so that you can get the latest educational resources that we've curated from all over the internet, and so that you can track your progress as you're going through the learning process. So we have a variety of resources for learning technical skills. And what we have here is we've curated the technical skills that we feel will give you the 20% of knowledge necessary to give you 80% of the success that you are looking for. You know, obviously the other 20% is going to come down to the factors in your local market. It's going to come down to interpersonal things, you know, such as how willing are you to develop your networking skills, business development. But ultimately, the technical skills here are the foundation of a very modern stack that's built on React, node.js, JavaScript in general, and Amazon Web Services, sprinkling in, you know, using Git for managing our source code, using serverless computing to create scalable, cheap APIs, the basics of UX design, and we also have resources for helping you find work. So job boards, a list of apprenticeships, resources for full-time work, startup resources such as document templates. But this has not been built. This has not been built yet in this web application. So if we click on startup resources, we are told, sorry, page not found. And you'll notice it took us to a different link right here. So that's one thing that we're going to be building, is we're going to build a view for this page that when we click on security, in the background, we're going to send a network request to get all the pieces of content in our educational API to populate right here. Now, a great part of this is going to be the training camp module, which is going to help you track your progress throughout learning. So here, as you can see, we have a list of objectives for you to work through. Everything from as simple as creating a GitHub account, putting your first hello world, to completing a required tutorial, to getting your first freelance gig, and towards building your first portfolio product. And the goal is that once you finish all of this, you should essentially be ready to start looking for full-time work. With your first freelance gig, you'll have the professional confidence needed to walk into an interview and say, I'm worthy of this opportunity. And with a portfolio product, building something from end to end is going to give you the confidence necessary to say, I can build products. I can build a web application. I can build a mobile application. It doesn't matter. I can learn how to do anything. And so, but as you can see right now, if we click on anything, nothing's really showing up. So we're getting information, but not much more. So we'll be working on integrating all this and adding the functionality we need to mark one of these objectives as quote unquote complete, to assign the proper amount of experience points that you're going to earn, and much more. So coming back to the code here, we can see that here at the bottom, we're rendering the app surrounded by a router. Now, what this is React Router. This is how React allows you to be able to go to different URLs inside of the application without having to reload the entire app. So what it does is it unmounts a component and it'll load the corresponding component that is meant for this route. That's very, very cool. It's called a, quote, single page application, SPA. And taking a look at the React Router file, it's pretty simple, right? It's not too crazy here. We're importing some components. And here, this is our routing tree. So we have a couple of things. The most important thing for you to notice is the unauthenticated route and the authenticated route. So these are custom components that, again, come from the boilerplate from the serverless stack tutorial, which you're going to work through in its entirety, to basically give access to this route if the user has successfully logged in, has authenticated. An unauthenticated route can be accessed by anybody, right? Anybody can try to log in, but only people who've logged in can access the settings. Something else that's really cool is that the router is actually receiving an object called child props from the app.js. And what's happening here is that these props, basically this data is automatically being passed in to any of these routes, and it can be accessed as simple as saying this.props.username or this.props.transaction.info. So it's a very, very elegant and unique solution towards how do we distribute data across the entire application without having to necessarily start with some of the more complex solutions towards state management, such as Redux, which I'm sure some of you have heard about. Now, let's go ahead and dive into the app.js so that we're essentially just going to take a look at what we have here. We're just going to walk through the code as it is, and then we will, in the next video, actually start putting together some new features. But right now, what we have here, again, we have some import statements. And what we're doing is here, we're importing from some NPM modules, right? All we have to do to import from an NPM module is to say, I want these things from this NPM module. And you can check pretty easily what NPM modules you have here. And if you want to add any new NPM modules, all you have to do is say yarn add module, and then press enter, and everything's going to work out just fine. Now, I want to go change back to app.js, so I'm going to press Command P, and I'm going to type app.js, and I'm going to press enter, and it just takes me back, just like that. So here what we're doing is we're actually importing, we're importing files, we're importing exported objects from an actual file, not from an NPM module. So what's happening here is it's saying we're getting routes from ./routes. ./ means that the file here is in the same folder. So, and the same folder is app.js. And if we look down here, we can see, aha, routes.js is in fact here. And if we look at ./app.css, it is in fact right next to it in the same folder. Now let's say we want to import something from a different place, right? Well, let's go ahead and import not found from ./ the containers folder, and just say not found. So unlike here where it says the app CSS, we don't actually have to add the .js here, which is pretty nice. Now, here what we do is we got to go all the way down here, and here we can go add not found. Now let's see what we got. Aha! There we go. So that's kind of the beauty of React here, is that we can import these components, right? And we can just plug them in and they'll display. Pretty cool. So let's dive into what the heck is going on here, right? So we have a class app and we're extending a component. So what this means is that the app is called a class component, which means that it has access to lifecycle hooks, which begs the question, what the heck is a lifecycle hook? Essentially, I look at it like the circle of life, right? If we want to talk about that Lion King movie that just came out. So we have Simba being born, right? A component is born. And when the component is born, we have the constructor. And what this does is it creates the default values for this .state and for any other values inside of the constructor. Essentially what this does, this .state, like what the constructor is it's kind of like a newborn baby's built-in DNA. It's the default value, it's what's there. But the beautiful thing here is we can define what is there. So we can create anything here. We can say name : Misha, right? And we can access this .state inside of our app. That's the really, really nice thing about it. So we'll skip ahead a little bit and we'll go down here and we'll go ahead and create a header tag, h1, and we're going to say, we're going to access this .state.name. We're going to wrap it in these little curly brackets, because that's how JSX, that's how all this HTML looking stuff, that's how that knows that it's JavaScript that we're looking at here. So let's go ahead and save, right? And so we printed out Misha, because that's what this .state.name is, right? This dot state name. And so this is an object, and for those who don't know, an object is just a sequence of key value pairs. So you have a key, and that key has a value. So if I accessed this dot state dot name, if that's the key, right? I put this in. I want to get the value of this key. It gave me that. Pretty simple, right? Now let's take it one quick little step further. Let's say that we wanted to have an object inside of an object, right? So let's have user, which has an object inside that has name Bob, right? Okay. So this dot state dot user dot name. So we can access properties inside of an object. That's the nice thing. It's very, very nice. So we can do that infinitely. We can just go on and on and on. We can infinitely nest objects like that. It's pretty great. So that's the constructor, right? This is the built-in DNA of the state of the application of the component before anything is rendered. Before we see anything on screen here, this data is already here before any of this pops up. The second step in the lifecycle hook is the render function. So the render function takes the state, any props, and it renders them. It renders them into beautiful, beautiful HTML and CSS. So what happened was that the constructor was made, and then the app rendered, and it rendered the name that was in the constructor, right? So this is the built-in DNA, and in many ways, this is the birth. The render is the birth of the child, if we want to go back to this analogy. It's the birth. Now, let's say the child grows up a little bit and wants to change his name, right? Misha, or Bob, Bob's not that, Bob's okay. But let's say they want to go, Bobby Knight, right? So what we can do is we can use a function called setState. And this function is going to be your best friend. I'm not kidding around. So what we could do is we could set state and we can say, I want the user object, I want to change the name to be Bobby. Now, what's going to happen is the constructor is going to give it this data. It's going to render. But then after the component did mount, so after the render, right, we're changing the name. But it works so fast on my fancy MacBook that you can't even see. Like I didn't even see Misha there. I just see Bobby. It just happened instantly. That's how fast React can be. So, but let's kind of walk through what's going on here in the component did mount. So basically, the kid grew up a little bit, wants to change his name. Here what we're doing is we have a try catch block. And what a try catch block does is it's a way for you to try certain commands, usually asynchronous network requests, usually like, fetch requests, that kind of thing. You're trying to get data from somewhere, or you're trying to write data somewhere. And the catch is that if there's an error, we can program some logic to take care of that error and to give it, certain actions that we want to take based on the error. So this is called error handling, right? But the nice thing about a catch block is that if there is an error, if it catches it, the app won't break. Or sometimes it might, but in general, when you catch an error, it prevents the actual site from crashing, especially if it's like a network request. So, and then below the try catch block, right? Because it's still not the entire function; it's just a part of the function. Now we're setting state is authenticating to be false. So we're going to come back to all the is authenticating stuff later when we integrate our new user pool, when we have forms to actually create a profile for our users. So we're going to come back to all that. We're going to come back to handle logout. But hey, what do you think that means? Like, there's very few things that could possibly mean. Handle logout means handle logout. It means that if you click this button, you're going to log out. So naming functions in a smart way is going to be good for you. Highly recommend it. So this is the JSX, right? This is the JSX is JavaScript syntax extension, I believe. And basically, it's a combination of JavaScript and HTML all in one beautiful package. I think this is so excellent because instead of having HTML and then having separate JavaScript scripts that you import, or God forbid, having to write the raw JavaScript inside of a script tag, this is just so much easier. And you can use JavaScript values to actually have business logic that determines whether or not something renders. That is just amazing. So here what's going on is here you see this question mark and this colon. This is called a ternary operator. That's a fancy way of saying this is an if-else statement. So if this .state.is authenticated is true, meaning that if that value is true, or if it exists, as long as it's not false, if it's true, then we want to show the settings, right? We want to show settings and log out. However, if it's not true, then we show sign up and login. So if we click this, this is going to become sign up and login. So pretty simple. And then again, here we have the routes, right, that we are importing up here from the routes file. This is our routing tree. And the child props down here, remember, this is the data that we're distributing throughout the entire application. That's coming from right there. It's pretty nice. So, and it's being determined here, right? So we're taking some state values and we're assigning them to a key inside of child props. So that's the app.js, right? And so, but now, so looking at the routes file, right? So we have the home page, right? The path, this is the home path, right? There's nothing else here. It's just localhost 3000. Technically, there's supposed to be, like, I guess that's supposed to be there, right? Like here. So we're loading the home component. Now let's take a look at what's going on in the home component. So, and first let's save this to get rid of that Bob. So we have the constructor here. We have the initial state, right, is loading is true until it's not, right? And notes, this is an empty array, right? So this is coming from the boilerplate from the serverless stack, which basically was just to do no app. We have a component did mount. Currently isn't doing too much, but it is saying that if you are not authenticated, it's going to take you out of this page. And here, all the way at the bottom, we have our render function, and we have another ternary operator, right? So this is the if-else statement, right? So this .props.is authenticated. So if this is true, right now it's false, but there's some stuff going on here that changes it to be true, and then we're passing, this is true right here. This is true right now, at least. Right now we're logged in, so this is true. And this is being passed in to this routes, right? And so here we have props equals child props. So this component has a props called props. So that means, and I know, pardon the redundancy, but here all we have to do to access that true value for is authenticated that was passed from app.js to the React router to here, all we have to do is say this.props.isAuthenticated. And if this evaluates to true, then we render dashboard. If not, we render lander. So right now we're authenticated. So let's log out. Okay, so this is the lander, right? Well, I guess we want to go here to the home. So this is the lander right here on the home, right? Pareto, your training companion, and then we got a button here, right? A login button. Okay, so we want to log back in, and we're going to create our own login system in a later video, but for right now, we're just running with this older one that I'm using just to make things a little easier. So what's happening here is it's rendering the dashboard, right? So let's go to the dashboard component. Let's check it out. So yeah, so this is definitely the most complex component we've seen so far, right? But it's not a whole lot, not a whole lot that's too crazy here, right? So looking at the constructor, right? We define some initial state, right? We have some empty arrays. What's happening here is we are using something called Sanity, which is a headless content management system, which basically lets us write out our content management and define title, overview, amount as a JavaScript object, deploy, and then we have this fancy editor that we can use to write the overview, write the experience amount, etc. So it's a headless content management system. It's very nice. And what we're doing here is we're using the Sanity API to fetch the data where the type is apprentice experience schema and the type that's product experience schema. And what we're doing is, so this training object is the returned value of this request, and this product is the returned value of this request right here. So now what we do is we do set state training. Here, this becomes training. Product here becomes this. So instead of being an empty array, all of a sudden, this becomes an array with a bunch of stuff in it. So that's why when we go to training camp, right, training or product, we see all this stuff. And what's going on is we're rendering this experience list. We're looping through all of these topics, right? And we're looping through and we're returning the list group item with a header, with a key, and we have these tabs right here. And this is a component that we're importing from React Bootstrap. And these tabs are smart tabs, meaning that if we click on tab 1 with event key 1, it's going to render this topic list with this parameter, right? So we can do this.state.training, this.state.product, finding work or training, right? That we're importing from right here. And those are just static JavaScript objects right here. So nothing too crazy. But what we're doing is we're selectively rendering something different based on which tab is open, right? So that is pretty much the entire React application as it is right now. And our next steps are going to be working through adding certain pieces of functionality that are going to add some serious polish to what we're doing. And I've started keeping track of these items on GitHub. So we're going to show the educational content from the Sanity CMS. We're going to actually show the articles and tutorials. We're going to make a profile system. We're going to make the experience system. We're going to make an events API, and we're going to integrate and deploy this with Amplify Console. So This was the first video in the series, and I am really looking forward to our next video, which is where we're going to show the educational content from Sanity CMS and start working on the profile system. So my name is Misha, and I'm looking forward to continuing to build the Pareto training web application with you.